schedule change. The biggest news from the offseason so far, because according to reports by Paul Tenorio, MLS is floating the idea to swap its schedule to mirror the European calendar, as well as many other leagues. But this idea means that a fall spring calendar with a winter break might be coming, and the changes plan on being made the summer of the World Cup. Now, there are obviously some pros and cons that come with this, and we did kind of cover this before, but let's just lay them out for the viewers and the listeners, depending on where you're watching this, and take it in for themselves, shall we? And let's start with the pros first. I want to just pick your brain. What do you got pros? Give me one, because
So
I want to give you some too.
yeah. So first one I'll go with is it's much better for the transfer window alignment with Europe. So it'll be, I think, a lot easier to make moves with teams overseas if the transfer windows kind of line up a bit more. And you won't have these like weird timing issues where one window's closed and another window's still open or whatnot. So I'll say that as my first pro.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. This would fit, and we talked about this problem in a previous episode too, which is the transfer market, right? Um, because it's so offset from Europe, you're missing out in prime real estate dates and timing, right? When the players who are most often bought and sold are right in the middle of MLS's season, they are pushing for playoffs and shields, and they're reluctant to sell. And it's a flip flop on the other end when MLS is looking to buy, it's in the middle of the European window, which they're now reluctant to sell, right? And that's not very great. And then there's also the idea of having less time to get the deals over the line as well, right? The Charlotte fiasco is a really good example of that, right? They had all these players lined up, and if you give them 2 more weeks, I guarantee you Miguel Almiron's playing in Charlotte right now.
Thank goodness they didn't have 2 more weeks.
Yeah, I know you would have cried. The other one for me is that the playoffs and MLS Cup would fall into a May and June kind of window, which is in theory a less crowded portion of the American sports calendar. They still have to battle with European leagues, and the time difference there would set up an all day soccer type of vibe, which I think would be cool. But you're not competing like right now. We're competing with the World Series. Right now, we're competing with college football and NFL start of the season. And now in May and June, it's a little bit more open. So just interesting in that sort of calendar layout. It's, where do you want your playoffs to hit? Do you want it in December where NHL is starting up and you've got football and stuff like that, or do you want it in May and June where you've got some other sports that have their finals and stuff?
The other one I had you kind of covered already. It was just to stop losing key players mid-season. I think that's a tough one. I mean, I saw it this year with Atlanta, right? Like we knew Almada was gonna be gone, but if a team was gonna drop decent money on him, it was likely going to be in the summer transfer window, which was gonna, that was gonna be a big hit on Atlanta's team when even though you knew it was kind of coming, it still hurts to lose him mid-season and then have to try to replace him and make a late playoff push. So if you align the calendars to Europe, I think you take that away where now you can teams are going to like be willing to spend and move players on like you were talking about when it's more aligned with Europe. So
Yeah, 100%. The other thing is this whole problem of international windows and having to play through them and lose some of those players. You talk about losing players mid-season. Not only do we lose them in transfers, but we also lose them at international windows because we are all messed up and playing through them. And it would be a really good improvement to those clubs who seem to be punished for having these players of international caliber who are forced to play without them due to this MLS schedule. You would get pauses during the international window, and you'd get the chance to really not be hurt by these players leaving, which I think is always very good. However, this isn't the end all be all because there are also a couple of negatives that come through this, especially in the northern states, right? Because this isn't a shock to anybody that a switch in the calendar to play in the colder months up to mid-December and into early February would cause some concerns in the cold weather climate. What other negatives do you see here?
yeah, so the first one I had was the one you were kind of just talking about, just potentially lower attendance in the northern states for these like winter months if they decide to play during those months. Just considering how cold it can get in places like Minnesota, Vancouver, or wherever. The other one that I had on here was and you kind of talked about it a little bit with MLS Cup and that timing kind of working out better actually, but the regular season itself, I think, is going to be competing more with the other major US sports with this change in the window. Because right now, you're kind of majority of the regular season is in the summer period where the only thing going on is baseball. So there's less competition for people to go see those games. So you kind of have to like weigh it. And what do you want to put more emphasis on? Do you want the cup and the playoffs to have more of a chance to shine or the regular season? But
Hmm.
with the change, I think you would now see the regular season competing with the NFL, college football, the NBA, where right now you kind of just have baseball in the mix. So I think that could also take away from attendance. But the flip side is, like you said, MLS Cup could be in a good period where not only is the weather nicer, but there's not as much sports competing against it at that time.
Yeah, 100%. And you talk about the drop in attendance, and one of those things that'll be impacted is you're going to lose a lot of summer games, right? The games that you were able to get the kids out to because there's no school the next day, and the timing means that you're not seeing it during games that you would be playing in or coaching in. Those go away and they move to earlier, colder times, and you already saw it online where people are like, yeah, sorry, I'm not going to games at Yankee Stadium in March when it's 20 degrees. But I do think that you're going to see a drop in attendance, especially from those early games, right? You probably see them come back in the middle, but right as things are getting going, you're going to take a break and stop it, or the end of the season. You got to play it out, and they're gonna put out fan polls, and they're really going to try and figure out what the fans are feeling because that's going to draw it, right? That's always going to draw it. But just looking at Twitter, which as everybody knows, is a tough way to get a true feel of what's going on. It looks like it's split 50-50 straight down the middle. There are a good handful of people who love this idea. There are a good handful of people who say this is the worst idea that they've come up with ever, which is par for the course, right?
Yeah. If Twitter ever agreed on something, the world would end.
Correct, correct. You got anything else?
No, I just had those two.
Gotcha. Well, I do have one more, and it's a scheduling thing. You've got this scheduling of tournaments like Leagues Cup and US Open Cup, they're all going to get thrown into a tizzy as well, as the kids say these days. I know that's what they're saying. Listen, currently Leagues Cup is played in this month-long span from late July to the end of August. And those in charge have considered following something like playing it in hubs in the South in January and February during kind of like this off period. And that means you're definitely going to see a decrease in attendance for those matches as well. You've seen what happens when two teams who don't have a home fan base, what those games look like. They're empty, right? They are absolutely empty, and there's no fans in the stadium, right? And because League Cup is a good driver of money, and money comes from fan attendance, if that goes away, League's Cup probably goes away too. There are some people who are probably jumping at joy when you hear something like that. There are some of us who think that that's probably not a great idea. Either way, I think there are a whole bunch of different things we can talk about with Leagues Cup, and we kind of talked about how to make it better. But one of the things that might end up happening is you are changing the length of that, so you're not having to fit it into different hubs as long, and there are different ways to do that. We've talked about that too, but outside of that, you have this tournament like the U.S. Open Cup, where if MLS wants to get back into that, you are looking at trying to fit that into a new schedule. And if you're taking off those summer months, which is prime for those sorts of tournaments to be played in, you are now going to struggle to fit that in there as well. So there's a whole scheduling thing that comes up after this. Now, granted, that's easy fix, right? That's something you just sit down, you bang out, and you say, okay, let's get this done. But it is still another hurdle to get over, right?
Yep.
Yeah. What do you think about the timing here? Talking about it during the 2026 World Cup right after that.
It's not I feel like it's not a bad idea because I think that might like obviously I think the World Cup's going to get a lot more people's eyes on it, and I think it could work out in terms of like so the way I think about it is similar to the way that I kind of got to the sport, where the first thing that got me hooked was the 2014 World Cup. Got to watch the US play. It was super exciting. It was fun. I think a lot of people are going to be on that train, especially when it's being played in the US and areas nearby. I think it's going to get more people into the sport itself. And then if you lined it up where now the MLS season starts right as the World Cup's ending, that could be a big positive because then you can follow a team from the start of the season. That's what I did. Once the 2014 World Cup finished, I picked the team in I hadn't started following MLS yet. I picked a team in Europe because I'm a Euro snob and started
Nope.
following them. And it was good timing because I could follow them right at the start of the season. So I think the timing of it makes sense to me at least. I'm sure there's a lot of like other behind the scenes things that make it a lot harder to actually execute than it is to just say it and make it happen. But I feel like it would make sense for that time period because if you get more people invested through the World Cup, it's a good opportunity for them to start following the domestic local league if that's just starting up as well versus if it's midway through the season already. Might be harder for someone to kind of jump in then.
Yeah, yeah. Listen, I agree with the same thing, right? You're gonna have all these new eyes on your product, and you want to make it as familiar to those people who are watching it as possible. So matching it to what they know and saying, okay, well, we're gonna go and do, we're gonna start the same time that Europe starts, so just watch it one over the other. Hey, can you calm down over there? Like we're trying to do this show here, and you're
I'm
just,
sorry, I got too excited.
yeah, I know,
You mentioned
clearly.
Europe and I got too excited.
Oh my God, Europe, yes.
Yes,
Are you
Europe.
telling me we've got a USMNT guy on the bench in Norway's second division? Get him over here. Let's go. No, but yeah, if you're trying to get these guys interested, okay, listen, watch your European leagues at 10 a.m. Go play Saturday afternoon, and then come on back at Saturday night. Watch your stuff here if that's really what you want to do. I think it's really good and how they transition between the two because you can't just stop one and start the other unless it's you're going to go with a really long off season or somebody some people have said maybe let's do like one more MLS is back type tournament in the layover time, right? Something just really big vibes and that we know it won't actually matter in the long run, but it could be a cool way to transition to it. But since we've talked about that, let's go to final thoughts here. Yay or nay? How do you feel?
I'm team yay. I say go for it. I think the negatives you can kind of work out eventually, and I think the positives will be like significantly positive and over a long period of time. I don't think it's going to be like short-term positives where then it kind of peters out. I think you can continuously keep getting positives out of this schedule change, whereas I think the cons that we had talked about, at least most of them, I think you could kind of work out the kinks of those and start to like phase those out. So I'm on board with it. I'm team yay on this one.
Oh, so you are back on Twitter because you just read the tweet that I put out 2 days ago and just regurgitated it. Nice.
I did not. I did no such thing. Just stealing your
Uh,
notes. That's all.
yeah, clearly. Yeah, the more I read about it and think about it, I'm also more team yay. And it all boils down to that idea, right? We just listed out the pros and cons. Every single negative that we listed, you can adapt to. Cold weather, your owners are billionaires. Put a roof on the thing. It's you're worried about scheduling of cups.
We
It's
have
already
technology.
yeah, it's already a nightmare to schedule cups and stuff. You can figure it out, sit down and bang it out in a day, right? Maybe Leagues Cup changes like we talked about before, less teams, more of a qualification thing instead of just everybody goes, less time off that you need to worry about. US Open Cup will always find its way through. It always does. The lost summer games is probably the biggest hit, but if the fans really do want to come out and see travel and see these teams and players play, they're going to do that. And at the end of the day, you're still getting a nice sweet chunk of that Apple money, right? And I reiterate, you have billions of dollars. You will be okay, right? But the positives that we have, if you don't make this change, none of those positives can be brought back in, right? You can not line up the schedule properly and get your transfer market to line up where you are buying and selling at the same prime times. Now you can shift it to give yourself more time to be competitive, but you're never going to be able to say, okay, yeah, I'll just take one of your players and we'll be fine. Or you can buy one of mine and we'll be fine. Right. That it'll never line up that way. And the same thing for international breaks. We're never going to find that way to figure it out unless we change things. And that changes the quality of the league. It changes the quality of the games that are played, and it changes the amount of people who want to keep coming back and watching. Because, as we mentioned, players, individuals are one of the main reasons that most people watch games to start. If you're showing up and saying, "Oh man, I'm here to watch Emil Forsberg," and Emil Forsberg goes off to Sweden, and you have to play without him for 6 to 8 weeks if he goes to the Euros or whatever. Well, now you've just lost maybe not a significant portion, significant to Red Bull because all five people who would miss out are like 35% of the fan base. But you can't bring those positives back if you don't do this. You can avoid the negatives, you can't bring back those positives. And the reason that I do think that it's going to get better, or we all better get ready for this, is because it sounds like the college game is preparing to do this as well. There was a really cool thread that came out and this is a whole second episode, we can't dive too deep into it, but basically said that college is looking to make soccer, at least at the first division level, a 2 semester sport to line up with this fall spring schedule with MLS and assumedly MLS Next Pro, which makes sense because a ton of MLS Next Pro guys roll in D1 anyway. But you're looking at lining it up and basically making it another feeder team that has the same schedule and all this other sort of stuff. If it's happening all the way down at that level, you have a good feeling it might be a long term thing. But at the end of the day, but at the end of the day, like you said, the positives outweigh the negatives, and you can work on improving the negatives and be successful long term. I'm here for it.
Woo. Go team.
Boop.
Boop.